Yesterday's focus was on combinations and permutations, and we mentioned that it was an extension or enrichment on the fundamental counting principle. Our expectation in 7th grade is that we understand the fundamental counting principle very well, not necessarily that we understand combinations and permutations very well. That will come later. Mr. Gable has 4 different pairs of pants, 15 shirts, and 23 ties. Assuming that Mr. Gable has 2,760 different outfit possibilities, how many different color pairs of shoes does he own? Now we have to remember that the fundamental counting principle tells us that M times a separate independent event N equals M in events, where M in events represents the total number of possible outcomes. Well, in this particular problem, we're given the total number of possible outcomes, 2,760, so we're going to plug that in on this side. And that's going to be equal to however many independent events there are and what their possible outcomes are. So, I have one independent event here. I have a second independent event there. I have a third independent event there. And we notice that we have a 4th independent event. That is how many different pairs of shoes we have. So instead of just having 2 independent events, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. And each of these is going to get multiplied together. So now we just need to figure out how many possible outcomes there were for each independent event. Well, for the pairs of pants, there were 4 possible outcomes. For the shirts, there were 15 possible outcomes. For the ties, there were 23 possible outcomes. And for the pairs of shoes, it doesn't tell us. That's what it's asking us to figure out. So whenever we're setting up an equation and we don't know a value, we end up plugging in a variable. So I'm going to use x. Now this should look a lot like a one-step equation, aside from the fact that we need to clean this portion up here. So let's go to our calculator, because these are some rather big numbers, and even I'm not going to sit here and do the chicken scratch. You're welcome to do the chicken scratch on the side and make that calculation. But we have 4 times 15 times 23, and that's going to equal 1,380. So we have 1,380 times x, or we can just write 1380x, equals 2760. And so now you should see a very clear one-step equation. Divide by 1380 on both sides. So 2760, yes, I know I see the answer too, but for those that haven't seen it yet, 2760 divided by 1380 gives us an x value that equals 2. So we got to figure out, what does that mean? Our x value, which we substituted up here for one of our events in the possible outcomes, means that we have 2 possible outcomes for whatever that event was. That event was, how many different color pairs of shoes do I own? Well, Mr. Gable owns 2 different color pairs of shoes.